Welcome back to the Growth Hacking Culture podcast. Today, we're diving headfirst into a hot topic that is sparking debates across offices and virtual meeting rooms. Will hybrid work be the death of the traditional office? For decades, the office reigned supreme as the central hub of productivity. But the pandemic threw a wrench in the works, forcing companies to embrace remote work. Now, with many organizations adopting a hybrid model, a blend of in office and remote work, the future of office hangs in the balance. Let me tell you, a recent study by McKinsey found that 90% of companies plan to embrace some form of hybrid work going forward. And a survey by Gartner revealed that 74% of employees believe that hybrid work is the future. But here's the twist. Stanford Institute for Economy policy research found that 55% of workers actually report being more productive at the office. So, is the office truly on life support or is it poised for a comeback? That's the question. To help us navigate this complex landscape, I have invited Angelique Slob, a leading expert on the future of work. She is the founder of Hello Monday Club, which is the big ass think tank rethinking work and the place that it has in our lives. She's also associated at Workplace, which is revolutionizing the hybrid work environment with a comprehensive platform designed to optimize experiences of people. So, and this is what we are going to be discussing. Angelique, thank you very much for getting the time for me and for the audience to talk about this story about the correlation between hybrid work, employee experiences. I think we are going to learn quite a lot.
Hi, Ivan. Thank you for having me. And of course, I always have time for you and your audience to talk about these topics. We have been discussing and following the developments in the world of work together in various conversations for the last years. And I'm really excited to see what this new chapter brings, because I think companies are now building the foundation of what the new world of work actually is going to look like.
But Angelique, if you have heard my introduction, it's not bloody clear where to go. Some people say, come back to the office. Some people say, stay in the office. And there is a lot of misconceptions about the hybrid work and its impact in the traditional office. What is your take about that?
It's interesting because there is a whole narrative about hybrid work. And the other day I said to a colleague that's been following me for like a long time. And I said, well, of course, companies have not been working hybrid for 3 years. Companies have been working hybrid for 30 years. And she started laughing. And I was like, and I said, well, there is so much debate. And to be honest, I find the discussion about time in the office, and especially if it's about days in the office, is a killer for us moving forward to build sustainable and people-centric workplaces, because it is not really what it is about. And then people really, it's a big distraction. It's distracting us from doing things that really matter. And what I see is like, of course, there are some large tech companies that have a return to office mandate announced, that for them also come with their own new challenges. So we might dive into that later today in our conversation, maybe. Interestingly enough, that in the US, I think there was a return to the office that kind of was a wave that happened last year. And I feel like in Europe, there is like a little push to a bit more office time. And if I dive deeper in those companies, if I speak to them, it is usually that there is another problem that they're trying to solve. For example, engagement or collaboration or culture. And I think, having people come to the office more often will be the solution. Not saying that the office can't play a crucial role in creating a culture, bringing more culture, creating engagement for collaboration and innovation. But as you say, for decades, the office has been seen as this hub of productivity. the office, the traditional office, has been designed for a white man, an extroverted white man in the 60s. So that is like that is literally, there are like, the temperature in the office is based on a model from the 60s, based on a white man in a business suit, and we are still using that model in when we put the temperature in our offices. And that also goes from the 9 to 5 model. It is a breadwinner model that was prevalent in the 60s, where the man went to work and was able to spend all day at work, while his wife was taking care of, kids, cooking, households, and everything else. These times are long gone. And so your question, like, is hybrid work the death of the traditional office? Finally, maybe it was the last step, and it was like, well, long overdue.
So if I understand correctly, the we are not asking ourselves the real question. I got the point from you that it is not about hybrid or not. It is about engagement. It is about how employees can decide on their own the choices that make them them more productive, more aligned with the culture, more aligned with the with the collaborative objectives that the company have. So it's more about like, can I have the choice of doing my work as I want, which is something that is very human, that the possibility, the option that we can decide how to do things. And this is what makes us intrinsically motivated to be more productive, to enjoy what we do, and to talk about all these crazy stories about being in the flow of work. So the question is not right. It's not hybrid or not. It
Exactly.
is choice for people or not.
Exactly. Around like 10 or 12 years ago, I finalized my studies around the most efficient management style for knowledge workers. And that has been, those results have been the base of my work from the last 10 years, like when I became a consultant, advising companies around HR innovation and new ways of working. One of the key findings is that knowledge workers need autonomy. They need high autonomy, and autonomy means if you are telling somebody you have to be in the office on those 2 days in the week, or three, or you have to come a day more often because in our leadership team we don't know, we don't have another solution for this problem, so we're putting it on your plate. You're taking away autonomy from that knowledge worker. And as a, just make it a more living example, let's say we have a software developer, and software developers, they often have to be really in the flow and focus. They might be in their personality a little bit more introverted. They might be overstimulated easily if there's a lot things happening. And often their work is very solistic. So if you put this return to office mandate, and especially if you have fixed days, that person might be feeling, okay, so on this Tuesday, I have to go to the office today. But to be honest, what I really need to do to get my results is write this piece of code. And I really want to sit in my own home office where I have my big screen, and where I can just, put my headphones on and be really, really focused. What I'm going to do in the office today, how I'm going to be productive there. I just get frustrated. I won't get my results. And just because leadership team thinks it's important for me to have lunch with my colleagues. It's not sustainable. It's not people-centric. It's not looking at what the people need to be productive. And that said, the narrative, there's another narrative that I find very harmful. That is that people say, oh, employees have the power and they want freedom and their work life, and employers have the power and that's why employers want people in the office. I'm like, that is literally not what we should be talking about. Again, that is an outdated narrative that comes from an industrial, almost Marxist era. And today we are talking about knowledge workers that need autonomy. Their success is the company success. They want to be productive. They want to thrive. They want to grow. And that is the other finding from my research. that knowledge workers are intrinsically motivated by solving challenges, being innovative, and working together with their colleagues on interesting problems. That is what you have to encourage and stimulate. And you do so by providing them, giving them space. So if they say really want to go to that cafe, or I want to go for a run in the forest because that helps me clear my mind, go for it.
Mm,
Want to sit in the forest for a week? Do it. But then that person, they will also understand that, especially if there are some clear goals and they have um, um, the collaboration in place, could be virtual or in an office space. They are looking to find their own colleagues. They will be connecting with their colleagues. They will schedule some a creative brainstorm session. They will connect around results about, the overall end result. And that is what companies need to focus on. Again, these are my findings my findings from 10 years ago. And I tapped into the work of, amongst others, Peter Drucker, who wrote about this in the 60s. It is literally not a post-COVID new thing. This has been around, this knowledge has been available to us from before we were born. And still we are trapped up in those narratives about power and power balance. And that is now translated into days in the office. So, oh, 4 hours more, 4 hours less. It's a power game, pulling the rope back and forth. So you bring it to that power level, which is not really not helping anybody and doesn't fit a modern company. So I'm
mm,
always like trying to get people away from that and bringing them into more scientific way of thinking and making them understand this kind of data, this kind of research as a way to help us to break down those paradigms, because those paradigms are so deeply in our system that is blocking us actually from moving forward. It's not our mind, because we can read the books and understand it on a rational level, but
mm.
in our emotional level, we really believe those outdated structures around work.
I can imagine easily an HR person in the audience listening to this is saying, "Oh la la, I have to do all this work because now I have to take care of providing autonomy to these employees, and I have to design areas for this autonomy to happen. I have to do more planning. I have to get a vision about what can support this vision of autonomy, productivity." You are putting a lot, Angelique, on the HR person. So, but how do we actually do it? Because, I mean, if I was an HR, I would be panicking because that adds to my day to day.
It
How can we do
is.
that?
Well, HR, first of all, has a lot on their plate. In a way, it's kind of positive in that sense that we can see HR becoming more business critical. So there is more and more elements of building a successful business going towards HR. And interestingly enough, I had a conversation. So I worked in HR, but I was more like I was an HR project manager. So I did large projects I was involved in mergers and acquisitions and restructurings. But I did that like, often as the HR director, where I was also looking into strategies. And I do remember that things I didn't care about, for one thing, was like the physical office. I really didn't feel that had anything to do with me or my role or my responsibility. Employee experience, I think we would probably have said, oh yeah, that's important for us. But if you look back at it 20 years ago, let's be honest, what was employee experience for us? It was just like, here's your salary, performance, growth, and as long as you don't have like real big problems with your direct manager, you should be fine. That's, to be honest, if you look back at it, like if you ask like a modern people and culture manager, they wouldn't recognize that. So that really, really changed. And interestingly, that now we're adding more on that is just a trend that you can see if you look back from 20 years ago, there will be more. But coming back to your question, like how are we doing that? At first, like I really wanted to acknowledge that it is a problem, like it is an actual trend that is happening, making the HR role more and more challenging. Um, the reason I joined Workplace, because that is an actual scientific methodology translated into a very user-friendly tech tool that will actually help companies to create that workplace experience. And it has elements of the more traditional and tangible areas like psychological safety or trust or culture, but it is tied to the workplace experience. And what I mean with workplace experience, that is actually the day-to-day experience of a worker today who is often a knowledge worker or at least an office worker, works in a hybrid setting because that's a given, just as much as a given that they are using internet and they have technology to collaborate remotely with others around the world. That is their reality. So in that reality, we are creating a work. We also have to understand that going to the office has become optional, one way or the other, and that is the current reality, which wasn't often for many people the case before. Going to the office. So I used an example is that suddenly the commutes has become part of the workplace experience. My home office has become part of my workplace experience. That wasn't the case before. So if if I'm an HR director and my leadership team asks me how do we get more people to the office and how can we maintain culture and engagement and how can we get those software developers that are 90% of their time working from home, and they work remotely so they can any other company, they can do basically the same work for any other company. How can we attract and maintain retain those talents for us and make sure that they feel involved in our company? Those questions, they are very, very valid questions, and that is the discussion in HR and leadership teams, and that will be the discussion for the next few years. You look at it, you have to understand that if you do not build an office that is fitted to the needs of the employees, it has nothing to do with power, but has to do with the choice and the situation and understanding that you work with humans. So you have to build that office that attracts and that is fitted for what your employees need, but also for what you want them to do there. So what are your cultural goals? What are your strategic goals? Making it a very simple, uh, translating it to a very simplistic example, because I like to do that. If you say, we want people in the office because we find collaboration important, and I come to your office and I see only individual desks, then I'm like, so why are you putting individual desks where people will be doing their individual focused work if you say that they need to be there for collaboration? So there are it's becoming a very interesting puzzle that is not only to be solved by HR, but includes facilities and real estate and the whole leadership team to be very, very much aligned about we have to know what our employees want and need, what they are doing in the office, what they are doing at home, why they prefer to work remotely, why they prefer to work in the office, what do they need when they are in the office. And a marketing director that is like a very extroverted person and needs to do very collaborative things and creative things, but also has maybe 3 children that she is the primary caretaker for, and maybe she lives far away, compared to a 25-year-old software developer who is doing holistic work and is very introverted. Those people have very different needs in what they expect in the physical office space, in the collaboration and dynamics with their colleagues, in their commuting, so in their hybrid scheduling. And these are all elements that we need to take into account. So Workplace does that in our workplace experience assessment. We gather the data from all the individual employees. Um, that's very that comes with a very advanced analysis in the dashboard function. So the company immediately gets like, okay, this is what we are and what our employees need and want. Um, in our solution, we also work with the leadership team. We help them define their cultural and strategic goals, because an innovative scale up has a different kind of culture than the tax authorities. In a way, tax authorities, for example, there is more control in processes. So then you would say, oh, that's a very controlling environment, so people have to be in the office. And I was like, well, actually, because it's the processes are so controlled, it is easier for people to work remotely, because you do not have to have this kind of like constant, intense collaboration moments, and this all this micro decisions that need to be made, that could be happening in a tech scale up. But a tech scale-up has a very innovative culture, and the innovative culture comes with a lot of autonomy. So that also means that you want to give that kind of freedom, but you want to enable the more collaborative environments. The model that Workplace used is the same model that I used in my research, which is great because it's I know the model like by heart. It's the competing values model of Cameron and Quinn. Also in the methodology is the 7 people principles developed by Nick Nonnington, which is who is one of the founding fathers, like the godfathers of the methodology. And we use a personality type, the Big 5 personality type methodology. So that's all been mixed, and there's been the tech team and the designers have done an amazing team of cracking the code of this new workplace, how to create a workplace experience. After that, cultural goals that will lead to a different kind of hybrid scheduling. It will lead to different kind of office designs. So individual needs, organizational, cultural, and strategic needs, that will be already calculated to optimal hybrid scheduling, and then it will also calculate the optimal office design.
Mm.
So meeting rooms. Does this meeting room need to be transparent glass or non-transparent glass? How many focus spots do you want? So, like for example, my personal advice in my productivity passport from Workplace, it says that I need to be in an open focus spot. And that is a pod that I can, that will be there, but there's like visual privacy, so people can't watch my screen. It's like quiet because it's kind of soundproof, and also, but it's still open, so I'm not in a private room, because I'm also very extrovert, so I can then easily connect with people. So in that sense, it is definitely giving people a different office design base. Um, it also, of course, that's only the first step, right? Because then the tool also helps facility managers and real estate managers to acknowledge, for example, to understand, like, okay, that person should have their own room, because that is like inherent on their role, because it's the HR director, and they should have a really large room, because they have very much business critical things to decide every day, and to have maybe intense discussions with other leadership team members. But also decide on the prayer room and the mother room, and like all those kind of, like, how many coffee corners do we want. So the tool gives a lot of um, um, it's a strategic decision making tool. that really connects all those elements from the workplace experience. And it's like when I saw it for the first time, I was just like, wow, this is just amazing. It's like literally the Rosetta Stone of of the future for workplace.
And you're right, because I still remember, like maybe 10 to 15 years ago, I remember that architects of office design were existing, but
Mhm.
everything was about aesthetics, having a pleasant environment for people. And here, what you're telling me, that is, it's not like that. It's about the personalization according to the type of task and personality of the individuals, about also organizational goals that you may have for the culture of the company, as you mentioned, maybe more collaborative, maybe more in the brainstorming area, maybe more into having process-oriented, making process-oriented task more effective. So it has become uh, it is like a platform that it is very human-centric oriented, based on psychology, based on research. By the way, research was existing also for a long time, but the thing is that putting it into a tool,
Exactly.
that's that's the challenge.
Exactly. Well, I feel like that it's really an amazing job, and but as you say, like bringing culture, so workplace consultants. So we see there are workplace consulting parties, and they usually they would ask about culture, but still that would be kind of limited, I think. By the way, this tool is also developed or like workplace strategist. That has only been like a specialty in the last 20 years. And the people in our team have been doing that for 20 years.
Hmm.
And they are amazed because they did this manually for their individual clients. And now there is a tool. So first of all, we can, it's more advanced. It's validated. So an HR director doesn't have to come up with their own set of questions and then, you don't really know what you're measuring because you haven't really done the 3-year research that is needed to understand what you need to ask. And also, this is a tool that brings so that brings those. It's exactly the automation. It is the calculation that is behind it that calculates like, okay, we have 1,000 people, and these are all their individual personalities, activities, commuting distance, remote working preferences, preferences on the actual physical workplace, their layout questions. We bring all that together with our strategic goals. We want to become a very highly innovative company. We also value results and interpersonal relationships. And that means that the company, the leadership team will define that, and that is like an interesting exercise that makes it for them intentional. So I don't like after the pandemic, I was asked by a leadership team from an EMEA team from a multinational uh, and the question was like, what are we going to do after COVID, and how is this hybrid thing going to work for us, and what should it look like? Obviously, not a question that me as an external advisor can come to tell a leadership team of a large multinational. And the discussion ended like because someone said, "Well, I think employee flexibility is very important. We want to attract people. We want to give them the flexibility they want." And someone else said, it was funny because I was saying it was a very strong German accent, and he said like there has to be rules. And, but basically, this is literally the discussion that is in every leadership team, and there is no way to you can acknowledge, yes, that's important and that's also important, yes, but how? And I look back and I was like, oh, I wish I would have had workplace then, because then I would have been able to work with them and get past that, like, I know this is my truth and I find this, I value this, or this is my opinion, or what we also see is a lot of the hybrid working discussions are fed by opinions and experiences. A CEO with 40-year experience who had like probably a spouse who took care of everything, and they worked really hard, and their collaboration was only taking place in person. So they use that experience as, their perspective, and say this is the way it works and how it should work for this company. And you will have to deal with that, and we see that often, like, nationwide, Amazon, Twitter, there is a change in the CEO, and then suddenly the whole organizational philosophy and HR policy and workplace and the building, everything needs to be adjusted because you change the tip of the pyramid. That should not be the case. If the pyramid is built on we know what we are doing, that the new CEO, will just look at the data and say, okay, I understand why it's like this. Not saying that there still be, of course, there's a lot of things that people will do themselves, and there should be. Um, but I find that very, very important. And um, it's amazing to see that cultural piece becoming not only more important, but also being enabled by the platform.
So for me, it seems that like it is an iterative process. So it's not like you do the design of the office based on human-centric needs of the employees first, and then the organization. But it has to be optimized continuously. It is something that has to be measured. You have some data. This we can be tweaked. Is that correct?
Yes. So in the assessment is obviously not something you would ask to people to fill in every week, but you can definitely do that, for example, twice a year. And especially if you have a lot of interventions, you can, after each intervention, you can choose to run the assessment again. The individual employees get their own productivity passport, which is pretty cool. And then there will be there's other data in the platform. For example, we also offer booking. So there's a booking facility. So you can see, and we also do occupancy measurements. Because of course, if people say I'm working in the office on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that's, they put that in the assessment, but it's self-reporting. And as we all know, people say one thing and then they do something else. It's really, really a strange thing that we humans do. And I always look at myself, I always say, well, I've bought like a co-working passes, like, with the intention I'm going to go there 3 times a week. And then in the end, like, it's the beginning. It's the 10th of January. How many people are already losing their gym membership?
Uh, Angelique,
Well,
you said something that is still turning in my head, and I want to be a little bit provocative. You say that going to the office is in most of the cases is an option. But I want to ask you, really? And in which countries? So is there either certain countries or certain industries who are really giving the choice for employees in a big scale, not like 5% of the employees in Netherlands, let's imagine, just to throw some numbers, have this option.
mhm.
Is there countries that are doing the best for this hybrid work, or and are the countries who are doing the worst? Like most of them are still in the office, like working like in the 80s.
Yeah, well, there is, of course, it's cultural, and that also means like over regions. The Netherlands is an example that in the 1990s, we introduced the new way of working, which is that was at that time an activity-based working concept, a workplace strategy concept, actually, where people, so that's where they let go of the traditional office, and introduced hot desk and coffee corners, and also more flexibility for people to work where and when they want. The large company, one of the pioneers there was Interpolis. It's a large Dutch insurance company, but it was also embraced with Microsoft Netherlands. So we are talking about at least 25 years, 25 to 30 years. So in the Netherlands, we have been doing this for many, many years. Some of the people involved in that beginning have been involved in this for 30 years are also involved in workplace. And if not involved directly, they are our advisor or partnership. But then you see more traditional companies, like I've been spending quite a lot of time in Portugal, where I was hanging out in the startup scene, and I thought it was all about flexibility and tech and modern working. And then I found out that it was just a very small percentage, and that the average Portuguese company was way more traditional, also hierarchical, and where people say will say to their and doctor to their CEO, which is like something in the Netherlands. Everybody just you know is very informal in the way making connections, building relationships as well at the workplace. I think there are differences, but in the way, and when I say going to the office is optional, I know that some people say not for me because I have to be there on every Monday and Tuesday and Thursday. I have to be there, so it's not optional. It is still optional in the way that you can also choose to work somewhere else, and even those 2 days that you go into the office not going to the office are already, bringing a kind of option. For example, overheard someone saying in the train, she said, yeah, I'm going to the dentist and I go at 8 in the morning because I want to go to the office afterwards still. But apparently she said, oh, for everybody else, having a dentist appointment means working from home.
Mm.
And it's just and I'm like, yeah, it is. It is becoming optional. Like, I don't go to the office because I have a dentist appointment. It is very individual. And we see companies moving into different spectrums of. You asked about countries, and you asked also about companies. Companies like Atlassian, Airbnb, Spotify, they have a very, um, very solid work from anywhere policy. So it's not, you can work remote from your home address, that is like in our country or in our state. It is, you can work from anywhere. And that means if you want to move to Australia, it's fine. If you are we work that out. So workplace itself is a work from anywhere, because we are also, our CEO is in Australia, and we have people from Dubai to Colorado and everything in between. I'll be spending my the summer in the Brazilian summer in Brazil again this year, and that's literally just kind of um, not an issue for no one, because so much of the work we do is either remotely, and moving to another location actually opens new opportunities, because you can make new connections in new locations. So I find that amazing. And if you look at if what is success, for us success is results, is making an impact with clients. And success is definitely not measured, but if I'm sitting in an office behind a desk.
I'm totally with you. Angelique, you mentioned that there is a strong correlation between how people feels, and it's not only about how you arrange the office, but it's also about the culture, which is also considered in the design of spaces around the employees. Um, is there any tips that you can give me about how can companies maintain a strong company culture when employees are split between the office and these remote locations like Brazil?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I like to just go back and what we just talked about those companies that are work from anywhere and distributed and remote first. What we see is they have intentional practices, processes, habits. That's culture, right? Culture is symbols, habits, rituals, and they put those in place in a distributed setting. So if you look at fully distributed companies, you see that they very deliberately do things to engage that strong culture. The problem with hybrid is that often people are not putting that on top of their office. So I've been talking about this like maybe like 2 years ago. I talked a lot about the difference in hybrid. You can have a remote first mindset and an office first mindset. So if you have an office first mindset, you still think, like as you say in the beginning of this conversation, the office is the center, is the hub of productivity. And if you are working away from the office, so then you are stepping away from our like central hub where everything happens. And you are allowed to do that part-time, as long as nothing else happens, because otherwise we just pull the leash back and we pull you back in. So that is office first thinking within a hybrid setting. You can always also have you can have remote first thinking in the same hybrid setting. And that means that you say, well, work in principle can be done from anywhere. You work from anywhere. We have policies and processes in place. That means that you will be setting up for success anywhere. And also on top of that, we enable an office, because we think it's important that you have a choice to be away from your private space and come to an office building that is designed for people to be success, where you can work in maybe in focused time, but also meet and greet your colleagues. We are providing a lovely, healthy lunch because we find that very important. It's part of our culture. It fits, what we do. That office space is reflecting our brands. It is designed for people to thrive during different activities and for different kind of personalities. And we have deliberately do that. But there is no way that we say that that is only the place where culture is built, or productivity, or happiness, or like employee engagement is happening. Um, it's literally understanding that it's a mix, and that's why I'm adopting the term and pushing the term workplace experience. It's a mix of giving people space to work remotely on individual tasks, to collaborate with their colleagues where needed, and allowing them that space. And that could be a headquarter office space, but it could also be a co-working space or like a satellite hub. So the third space is also becoming more important in that workplace experience. And it's one of the things I see that companies usually and I do not want to spend money on. And I find that basically for me it would be a no-brainer as an HR director to say, okay, we need to provide a third space.
Mm. Do we have really like tangible proof that having this option of hybrid work actually boosts productivity?
Yeah, there are definitely resources that, and I think like I just want to um, uh, say something to Nick Bloom. He's doing a lot. Stanford University. He's been publishing a lot of research about pure productivity. What I like to add is like companies like McKinsey and Big Four Consulting. They publish regularly, and one of the things that I see is that flexibility. Of course, my own research shows that autonomy is good for innovation, but flexibility is also good for diversity. Diversity is good for innovation and all kinds of success metrics. And that's something that's really overlooked also in the diversity and inclusion discussion, that the office space, inclusive workplaces, but also flexibility are important for diversity and inclusion, and diversity and inclusion are directly tied to company business goals.
Mm. Angelique, it's your fault. You have named McKinsey. I want to throw back a question that is super provocative. So, for the sake of autonomy, so McKinsey is offering indeed uh, a certain level of autonomy in terms of hybrid work. In the past year, there has been a couple of incidents of suicides, people killing themselves because of our work. Now, my big question to you is that is it enough? Because probably these people have taken the choice to go above and beyond of in terms of the time that was and the management of their internal resources, their energy, their level of stress they have taken on them. So my big question is it should companies offer more to employees so that even if they're working remotely, that they have a way to measure if they are overdoing it? Because sometimes we believe that, oh, I need to finish uh, my boss say for tomorrow, even though I am at home and maybe I'm in a nice familiar environment, but I overdo it and I don't manage my mental health.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we can do on that?
Um, that is something that is really in culture, in organizational culture. But first of all things are very holistic, right? So those
Mm,
big four, I worked at a big four company as well in my early HR days. One of the things is that their business model is based on hours. So they're selling hours. So productivity is not results, it's hours. And if you see that, then you're already like, how can we change? Go to I worked with I helped a small marketing company.
mm,
They had an hourly model when they started, but they also wanted to bring like this flexibility and autonomy into their organization and encouraging people to take care of their own energy and their own And I was like, well, there is a discrepancy. So if you change your business model to become more results driven, offer a package with results instead of like billing hours. So I told them first to start with their client side. And because I saw that mechanism in the big four. And the mechanism big four is not only like the hours, of course. Also, I couldn't say now on top of my head how they changed that, but it's also it's peer pressure, it's culture. So I was involved in a large due diligence in one of those mergers and acquisitions, and there was like a team of 30 accountants and consultants from a big four. And one of them was a partner, and I was like, kind of involved with him. And at one point, he had small children, and he said, well, as many responsible parents that are very well educated do, they have set screen time for their children. So he's like, oh no, it's only like maximum 3 hours screen time for the children. And I look at him and I said, what's your maximum screen time?
mm. Good
And
question.
And he looked, and but that is like a good question. Yes, it's a good question because as a parent, you look at your child, you're like, it's not good. My child needs to play outside. My child needs fresh air. My child needs to have a balance. But as soon as it's about yourself, you forget about that. And it's like, and that is at that time, it was after my first few years that I was unlearning my, like long hours and I had become more location independent and bring the own freedom of my own hours. And I noticed how important it was. So, um, and I think that is one of the things that um, the activity-based working concept that has been around in a new way of working in the Netherlands for a long time, it's now changing into some say experience-based working, um, or some say energy-based working. And I think, and that is an awareness. And as soon as the as soon as we were forced to work remotely because of COVID, I said, this is going to change the way we work, not only temporarily, but because employees are starting to in the longer, not for 2 weeks, but I was like, when it started to become longer, I was like, yes, now people are going to experience that they have different needs, their own biorhythms, their own like physical needs, their well-being needs. They are going to understand that once they start to balance them differently, which they can because they're working remotely, um, that means that they start to understand how valuable that is. And that is exactly what we see. It's not because people say employees want that. Yes, employees want that because employees need that, especially since we are no longer in the 60s. Um, so many reasons is that we need to bring that energy-based working into the mix. And I speak from my own experience, it's really hard.
Mm.
Employees in general, people in general, are maybe at, really at the beginning of their journey of understanding their own needs and how to balance that with productivity and work. And as a company, it's important to become a life coach in that sense.
Mm.
So it's horrible to hear that people taking their own lives because of work pressure. My slogan, rethinking work and the place it has in our lives, means that we are not being put on this earth to kill ourselves because of our jobs.
Yeah,
It's a,
definitely.
it's
Mm.
and if we see this in a culture, um, with like clear relation to the culture that we are building, then we should scratch ourselves behind our ears and say, okay, maybe we do something wrong here.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and another question I've often asked leaderships, like CEOs and people. So, well, I just asked, like, make conversation, and then ask them if they have a child, and they would say, well, yeah, I have like a 15-year-old. And I was like, so they're going to be, like in 6, 7 years, they're going to be starting their work life, and they're like, yeah, they'll have a job. And I'm like, okay, so what kind of organization would you love for them to work at? And then they just look at it and they're just gonna be like, and I was like, well, that's the organization you now have 6 years to build. And it's a very confronting question, but we touch people in their human side, and then we can only do that and to build a human-centric organization.
Angelique, I have the impression that if today we go and do a little bit of a poll survey with companies, they will tell you, yeah, we are awesome. We have a hybrid work policy. But for me, it looks a little bit subjective. Is there a way to objectively recommend to a company to say, how do you measure if your policies for remote work or hybrid work are effective? Is there a way so that they can have the reality instead of just the feeling that it's awesome because my CEO did it?
Yes. Well, a workplace is actually the tool that is developed to do that, amongst others. So that's definitely one of the use cases. But also again, it's a starting point, right? Because in the end, it is a tool and it gives you data and it gives you insights, but a company can choose to ignore that. And also, as often, you have to dig a little bit deeper. But I think it is about, as you said before, it is about intention and continuous improvement. So, workplace as a tool will allow companies to at least have a data set, and also a data set that is not based on fragmented data. Facilities has this, and HR has that, and the real estate has this, but really like a one source of truth data source. That is being continuously fed with different data points, and that has a feedback loop. And from there, companies can make those decisions. They will still have to do the work. And of course, if you implement a tool and still overrule that based on your personal gut feeling as a CEO, then also the tool will lose its potential, right? But I think the power of a tool like this is that it starts to connect different stakeholders, objectifies the decision making, and therefore takes the personal opinions away from the discussion. I think they will just disappear. So you don't have to have that conversation anymore. And then with the data, of course, you can start self-assess. You can get expert advice. Interestingly, like partners that we are working with now, so because we are adding partners to our network that want to use this tool for their clients, and So maybe some people in also in the audience would be interested to learn more about that. But we are also working with, for example, a diversity and inclusion consultant who says, I find it really, really important because this is really about the inclusivity, because we can get access to data between different kind of how gender, for example, remote work, preferences, the preferred hybrid schedule and the current hybrid schedule, and the gap that could be different for women or for more junior people. We also see things about CO2 emissions. So we can see the means of transportation. So, but we can also see the difference between um, even like, the need for plants between generations. We can see all those kind of differences between personality types, generations, gender, seniority, and these are diversity and inclusion metrics. And of course, like if the facility manager is like designing their new office and they have the option to put in a prayer room and a mother room, it would be nice if they have some diverse, inclusive thinking in that space, and that allows also the tool allows people, consultants like that, um, to guide that company to not only have certain elements of diversity and inclusion in place, but also again translate that to the overall workplace experience.
You know what? I don't like the name facility manager. It should be people's experience manager.
Well, there is, interestingly enough, so I know companies that have a workplace experience or workplace manager, but we see HR director and facilities, and then I'm like, who is actually responsible for that workplace experience? But there's like literally companies that have them, right? The and sometimes it comes from facility, or like, the head of real estate services. And there has been such a shift, Ivan, that as far as I was like, that the building and the furniture, that's not me as HR. If people were like coming to me beforehand complaining about their chair, I would be like, that's not me. Go to facilities. So facilities have to go think about people and culture. And HR has to start thinking about the office. And the real, like, I've been speaking to some workplace experience people that really nail it. They understand it so well. They're like, it is about aligning the people with our place. So some of them have moved beyond like their facilities role, and taken on that workplace experience, people experience role, understanding this really, really well. And so I think there is a very nice opportunity for um, also all kinds of consultants and culture consultants and leadership consultants, HR consultants, diversity consultants, to be ahead of that movement and step in the role of workplace experience, and being able to get that bridge. And workplace is literally the tool that is doing that, is that would be supporting that, because it's very difficult to to do that without. And like I had my conversations with workplace in the first few months, and HR before I was like, so what was HR doing actually usually for you guys? Because they were workplace experience. Oh, they would give some data. They would just tell us how many people the company had, how many people they were going to be hiring over the next years, and maybe some results from a workplace or like an employee experience assessment if they already asked
Hmm.
things about the actual workplace. Now HR has to be leading that discussion. Has to be saying, okay, what our people need is, have to be reflected in this physical office and all the policies and the culture around it. So that's a fundamental shift. And HR is usually not there yet. Not all companies have somebody sitting in that workplace position. So I think this is a huge opportunity for people and culture consultants, also for people and culture managers internally to expand that. That said, I do see scale ups, like smaller startups and scale ups, they often have HR operations, that is, all the processes, and people and culture. And the people and culture person is often also responsible for the office and the space. So it's definitely where, the future of HR is moving to. And I think we do not understand yet how business critical it is. And then it will be evolving into employer branding, uh, and even branding, because you really want your office to be reflecting your brand. If I go into an office before, like, you go to an office, you're like, yeah, it's an office. You go to another office of like the competitor, you would be like, yeah, it's an office. It has desks and, maybe some plants and there's painting and some meeting rooms. But in the future, you would walk into the office and you would be like, yeah, oh yeah, this is definitely, I now understand this company. And it's not because of the logo, but, like everything should be breathing that brand. And some companies are already doing that. And that is also one of the things that workplace, that companies are heading to. So it's becoming all those silos that we used to have, like HR facilities, marketing, sales, and now it's becoming one super holistic approach there people add to that, like from their expertise, but definitely not stay in their own silo.
Hmm. Angelique, we could be discussing about the topic for hours, and we have reached already the hour. But how can people, if they have questions about employee experience, developing amazing cultures, redesigning the physical spaces so that people thrive and are more productive, how can they reach you out?
Yes, I think it most easy on LinkedIn. My name is Angelique Slob, and you will just find me by typing in my name. You can also send a hello to hello@Hello Monday Club. And also Workplace, it's Workplace with a D, so workplace.com. Is worth to have a look at the site, and there people can fill in their own personal profile. So if you haven't done so, Yvonne, I would like to invite you to do that as well.
I
And you can
will.
and you will see your own personal if you do that, do it with your private email address. And then you can get your own personal profile. But definitely, I just wanted to say the other day I was looking, I was I was looking in what do companies usually use for workplace experience assessments. I've done some research and there is nothing. It's like culture assessments, leadership assessments, personality type assessments. You can't see the forest through the trees. But specific what we are offering, it isn't not existing. So, and I think it is amazing for companies, any company, to say, okay, we want to do that assessment. If you only do the assessment and put it in the data and take it from there, and I think it's really worth it, especially now in the midst of people still figuring out what their hybrid future is going to.
Indeed. Angelique, it was really lovely to have you in this podcast. Uh, Thank you very much for making the time, and thank you for the valuable insights for changing the workplace.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to continue our conversation, as I'm sure we will do.